Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode of our Dynamics AX to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations Journeys series, I am welcoming back my co-host, I guess I should call him my co-host, Peter Jekyll of Turn On Dynamics. Peter, welcome back to the series here.
Thank you, Jason. Good to be here again.
And this is episode 4 of our series. We are all about the question of hybrid deployments today, and we have a very special guest joining us to help us untangle this question. Peter, who is that?
I got my good friend Ken Edwards, who is the probably the number one person I've wanted to get on this podcast series, and I'm really glad he's able to join us here. I've known Ken probably more years than I care to admit, because of how young I still am. But Ken's been a phenomenal IT director at several very large international companies, very well known that had AX implementations. Ken's been on the VAR side of the business. Ken has worked in the industry, and he's got a fantastic background, not only in the IT side, but he understands the business side, he understands the development side, database. He's just an incredible resource for not only AX but and D365, but all the surrounding technology. And I have found over the years that whenever I need to go to a guy with some complex type of question, he's always the guy that if he doesn't know the answer, which he usually does, he'll find it and get back to you with a great solution for you. So I'm really happy. And Ken, thank you for joining us.
So Ken, welcome.
Happy to be here, guys.
Excellent. And boy, with all those nice things that Peter has said, I'm excited to have you here, and I'm hoping you are the person to help me understand better what we're really talking about. Because one thing I was remarking to Peter when we were talking about this particular episode was I really wasn't sure as of this point in time where the hybrid story is really at with F&O, with finance and operations. I know it was a real part of Microsoft's plan to actually build and support sort of architectures and that can support real hybrid deployment needs that different industries, different kinds of companies have, depending on their global architecture, their locations, the way they run their businesses. But in the last year, I was thinking back, and I don't know if I've heard any updates about whether the company can support any real hybrid as opposed to the progress they've made with on-prem deployments of F&O, and obviously the very strong interest in beefing up the cloud SaaS F&O.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. In the original, the early days of F&O, there was this concept for hybrid, and it was a way to allow customers to have access to that SQL Server database in more of a traditional way, to help build integrations to a near on-premise solution. Because remember, the original concept for hybrid was that the solution ran in a replicated version in Azure, right? So it really wasn't on-premise. And over the last couple of years, as we've started to work towards more SaaS models, Microsoft has also released a true on-premise version now. And so the hybrid concept, it's fizzled out and gone.
So Ken, a couple, obviously, tons of follow-up questions to that, especially for somebody that's looking to upgrade, right? Anybody that's looking to upgrade that has multiple locations, maybe has retail, maybe has warehouses, maybe has manufacturing in a shop floor. And the issue always there is, how do you not have, timeout issues of signals coming from a data center somewhere all the way down to the shop floor and making sure that stuff goes back and forth. And that, that's one of the issues that, people were looking at with the hybrid solution. Are you saying that's improved now?
Well, I'm saying we're kind of back with the same options that we always had. Remember, the real issue on, as you referenced, the global deployments in maybe to one or maybe a few different data centers is that it's all about the network at that point. It's all about your connectivity between sites. You have the same problem with SaaS. You're just dealing with your internet connection at that point. And on the on-premise versions, you deal with your intranet or your global fabric, right? So it's really more about that than the kind of architecture that you build it off of. And when you talk to Microsoft now, when you talk about global deployments, they are definitely going to push you towards the SaaS model to eliminate a lot of your own internal intranet issues that you might face to build up a global network.
Are you finding those arguments, or I should say, are clients finding those arguments convincing? I've heard that some basically don't buy it, and they say, "Well, we're not real confident in our network, and so we're going to go with on-prem."
It's amazing. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's amazing what's happened in the last couple of years. And think about it. I mean, when D365 hit the market in 2016, the confidence of a SaaS ERP solution was relatively low. And I mean, it was probably somewhere around 30% of people trusting that kind of a solution. But think about where things have gone over the last few years with enterprise architecture. We pushed about everything except for ERP into the cloud. It started with email, right? I mean, Google and Office 365 now and other sorts of online services. We pushed communications up and we found that it worked. It didn't come crumbling down. And in fact, it helped us with a mobile community who just demands access from anywhere, right? So now as you start getting into 2019, the confidence of a SaaS-based ERP is much higher. It's probably somewhere around 60 or 65%. And you also look at the market where traditional on-premise solutions, and I'm talking about the Oracles and the SAPs of the world, are rapidly trying to build up a SaaS model to compete head-to-head with Dynamics 365. Oracle's introduced the product NetSuite to do just that same thing, to offer a true SaaS ERP. So customers' focus and their confidence about cloud has changed significantly just in the last couple of years. And I think people are a lot more receptive now to the concept of putting their enterprise business data up into a cloud environment.
One thing I've been wondering about, and I don't have any data on this, I'm wondering what your sense is. I have sort of a running hypothesis in my head that the companies that had the more straightforward use cases that could adopt cloud are the ones that are going for it, and the ones that are hanging back are the ones that are thinking about the more complex architectural issues like hybrid, like the idea that they want to keep their operations running in a plant when it goes offline, and 4 hours later or 8 hours later be able to somehow harmonize that data back with the central operational ERP. You know what I mean? When those are established, which to me sounds like a much more complicated requirement than what the maybe the prototypical SaaS ERP customer would go for.
Well, you kind of think that way, right? You think that the smaller customers might adopt, the SaaS model a little quicker because they're a little more nimble. They haven't got as much invested in architecture and infrastructure, and that's probably true. And on the other end of the spectrum, which is really interesting, is the larger corporations are also looking hard at SaaS because they have so many different operating units, and each one of them is more or less independent, more capable of moving towards a SaaS, where they can begin to phase migrate each of those operating units onto the common platform. The guys who are having the most trouble are those folks that are in the middle, the folks who have not only leveraged third-party apps and solutions from the market, but also wrote a lot of their own applications themselves. Homegrown apps and the predominance of homegrown apps in those mid-sized companies tend to slow people down from going to the cloud because they've got to reinvent most of their integrations to a cloud solution.
Peter, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, this is a fascinating conversation here, Ken. So from a practical standpoint, if you think back of one of the places where we worked together, and perhaps after work enjoyed a fine bourbon or two, if you were to go out today and you were the IT manager there, and you were running, you're running shop floor control machines, you have legacy systems that have to talk to the new ERP. How would you architect that with the D365? What would your thought process be today, knowing what you know today?
It's that same problem I just described, because in that same customer that we both worked on and lost a lot of sleep on, and we can look back and we're very proud of the work that we did there. They were that kind of mid-sized company that had a lot of homegrown apps where everything was truly integrated directly to the enterprise layer on the ERP or other supporting systems. There was not a data warehouse. There was not an integration framework. And so for a company like that to entertain, a completely different model, a SaaS model where you don't have direct access to the database, where you have to rethink a lot of your integration strategies, it's going to be harder for them to make that transition to the cloud than to replace certain on-premise components and just keep doing what they always do. In reality, it's probably better for them to go ahead and build that solution now. It might take a little longer, but eventually they will get there because, quite frankly, the entire market is going to cloud. And we can resist. It's kind of like the horse and buggy, which was replaced by the car. Eventually the car came along and everybody had to do it, and the horse and buggy faded away. It's just a matter of when you decided to do it. So that company that we both enjoyed those bourbons at has probably got an aspiration to get to the cloud without a strategy. And that's where partners like you and others can step up and help them build a strategy to get to the cloud, because face it, they have to do it eventually anyway.
And my follow-up on this is the cost on this for some folks is going to be astronomical, right?
It normally is, but you think about it the other way around too. Pardon me. What does it take to keep those legacy apps running, those homegrown apps running, and to keep the infrastructure around it running, and to keep all the lights on for all the different things that you've built over the years, as all of technology is changing around your company and you are not, right? So you're almost siloing yourself into a situation where if you wait too long, the cost to change is even higher than what it would be today, right? So the best plan is to go ahead and build a strategy to adjust with what the industry and technology, curves are doing, to get on board while you can, and to minimize the cost, because if you wait too long, it's going to cost you even more. It may seem like it won't, but eventually they're going to have to do it. And quite frankly, it's going to be even harder if they wait too long.
I think one of the terms that I've heard in the industry when it comes to taking legacy systems that really aren't cloud enabled is the term lift and shift. Have you heard that terminology?
I have. Yeah. The real key there is to have an integration framework that's based on web services, right? And so there are some tools out there that allow you to build integrations, such as like a MuleSoft or whatever, that have that framework already there. So if you need to build an integration to a cloud service from a legacy app that doesn't have that framework today, you can pull in an ISV, you can make that connection, and it would run confidently with very few errors in the future. So there is a way to do that. You think about some companies that have very unique, homegrown middleware solutions. They're business drivers. They're things that are unique about their company that they have to keep going, right? That's common. And there are ways to make those work without reinventing the wheel, so to speak. It's really the integration layer that you have to cover, and really getting modern on that edge of technology.
Well, this is one of the points that I was thinking about, I think, Peter, coming out of our last conversation about regarding how expensive some of these endeavors can be. Is there is there a stepwise approach? I guess was my thought after that. Are there ways to do it where you're not front loading huge costs up front, or you're not making one big payout in one quarter or even one fiscal year, but still getting there?
That's exactly what some of the larger corporations are doing today by migrating or phase migrating individual business units, or countries or locations onto the platform. They're just doing it over time. So middle-sized companies can do the exact same thing. Maybe you just put finance up, but you don't put manufacturing in right away. Maybe you want to leave, some components of your business running on those legacy apps and build an integration, which might be throwaway later on. We've all done that, right? But it's a way to build the platform with the least amount of risk and, quite frankly, the least amount of cost. So it's all about that partner going in and helping build that strategy, that cloud migration strategy, and really it's all about trust.
And so really what your message is here is that if you're a company that's in this mid-sized arena that has these legacy system integrations, that has, inventory, that has inventory data collection, shop floor data collection, and a lot of that stuff is aging, and you're looking to take your AX into the cloud, and you're getting a proposal that takes you from AX into the cloud, and that partner hasn't looked at all of those other components and how those fit into your strategy, then you haven't had somebody take a good look at your upgrade.
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, it has to be a comprehensive strategy. You can't think, let's just move AX 2012 to D365. That doesn't work, right? If you think about those companies that are highly integrated to homegrown applications and ISVs and third-party solutions, et cetera, you've got to take a comprehensive look at all of those different applications in the business architecture and develop a strategy where everything stays running. And so this is another reason why it's harder for those mid-sized companies to make this kind of a move. They don't have the resources to fully document all those different applications and integrations that need to be made. So many times partners go in and wisely so, perform an assessment, a small, like a mini project, to document the current as-is state of the business and technology, and then look at each of those different components and application sets and determine the best strategy to start to build out onto D365. How much can we do and over how much time, right? And Peter, I know you know how to do this. I've seen you do it. So, and we've all done it. It's the right way to build a strategy. The real point is that the industry is moving to SaaS, and it's moving very, very quickly. Microsoft has signaled that, that is the future. And so has SAP, so has Oracle, so have all the others. And so the real key here is, and the message is, build your strategy now and do it with somebody you trust. Because the sooner you get there, the lower the cost will be.
Ken, so I have a question for you that I've always thought about in moving ERP software to the cloud. And it's really interesting to get somebody's viewpoint that has more of a bigger overview and behind the scenes of how all this technology hangs together. My thought was always that if you're looking at a cloud solution, right, and your best customer is a 3-user company, right, that never modifies anything, isn't connected to anybody, and every month they pay like clockwork, right? So if I had an ERP solution, I would rather have 1,000 3-user companies, right, than 3,000 user companies, because if you have companies with all those integrations, with legacy systems and all these different devices, the level of complexity and the alarm bells that go off, at Microsoft on a daily basis, that's got to be, significant. Am I wrong in that? Am I wrong in looking at it that way, or does all that business just, all that money of moving all this stuff into the cloud just overcome all those difficulties?
Well, it's not just the initial project, remember. I mean, larger companies, when they migrate to the cloud, they need that partner for more than just the implementation, because there are always ongoing activities that are needed to support their environment. New reports, new integrations, changes in legislation which affect the way they process. I mean, there are so many different things. So a lot of partners would prefer to have the larger company because they can have fewer of them and have more work to do, right? It's just a matter of perspective. Now, Microsoft is aware that, those smaller companies, like you put, the 3-user companies generally have, in most cases, fewer technological needs than some of the larger companies do. And that's one of the reasons why they released Business Central. If you think about it, Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, the Enterprise Edition, has a minimum user count of 20. And that's because it's a more sophisticated product. And like you pointed out, for 3 users, Business Central is ideal. You can buy 1, 2, or 3 licenses and work just fine. And so many partners are really just going after that market because, like you pointed out, you install and you basically walk away. Those customers are self-sufficient from that point forward. It's really a partner perspective. It's what you want to focus on.
To change gears just slightly here, maybe with regard to some of the approaches that you advocate for, Ken, how have you seen Microsoft support some of those approaches, or what would you like to see from them if there's areas that maybe partners are going it alone on?
Microsoft, historically has stood behind the partner, right? So, and that's really been their selling model from the beginning of Dynamics. Customers historically have not bought direct from Microsoft. You bought direct from your trusted partner, who then buys from Microsoft, right? And it works that same way on the reverse for support. This new concept for going to the Microsoft Dynamics website and ordering licenses for your company directly with a credit card is something totally new for Microsoft. Now, support is direct, via web page, and I think you lose a little bit of what the partner can provide at that point. The real service nature of a partner, the strategic advisor, the friendly neighborhood partner approach. But if that's what you want, it's now available, right? Microsoft is trying to accommodate the change in the way customers want to buy, the way customers want to interact with their solutions provider, right? So they've offered up the ability to buy direct. I still think your best model is to go through a local or regional partner if you can. Someone who can visit your office, talk about strategy, help you make decisions and plan for the future. But just as you pointed out, Microsoft is accommodating the customers in ways that they've never thought of doing before, because that's the way the industry and the market is going.
And where do you draw the lines around that? Are you talking about things like, sort of managing what orders and spending? Does that involve like Lifecycle services and other online tools like that, where the company is sort of hitting Microsoft systems directly?
Yeah, and so
other things?
Of those larger systems, I think Microsoft's on the right track. I mean, some of the products these days, if you look at the change in TFS to, VSTS to now DevOps, is to make DevOps more of a bigger, grander project management suite. There's still some work to be done there, and Microsoft is working on it. But I think they realize that, not only partners, but customers need more robust tools to even fully implement their products. You think about what AX has become in the last 15 years, for example. It's so sophisticated. It's basically one size fits all for any business. Where it used to be a great manufacturing or warehouse distribution tool, it now fits into industries that we never thought it could ever get into in the past. And so you need to have tools that help you deploy that solution successfully into those different industries. Well, like you pointed out, Microsoft is accommodating for that. They've built, Lifecycle services to allow you to manage instances and the whole project lifecycle of an implementation. They've developed VSTS, which is now DevOps, to help you manage the activities around deployment. It's not just dev now; it's all the functional and planning and coordination that goes along with the deployment project. And these tools are actually evolutionary. They're changing almost daily. They're getting better every day. And I think Microsoft, is doing something that they've done very well over the years. They're listening, and as people provide feedback, those tools are only getting better. Look for more of that as the market changes. It seems like Microsoft is doing a good job of trying to stay ahead.
Aren't they really setting the market as opposed to, trying to stay up with it to an extent?
I think they're an industry leader, that's for sure. If you look at reports, I don't know, Gartner, Forrester, whatever, it seems like other two products are always listed higher. I'd like to debate that one day, but I do think Microsoft has really captured lightning in a bottle with this D365 product. It is definitely revolutionary. in the concept of ERP. And it's got the competition reeling and trying to compete, and at the same time, Microsoft is so quickly evolving this product and adding more to it and giving us more tools. As Jason pointed out, the race is on, and it's only good for the consumer. It gets better and better every day. And like you said, I mean, ideally and probably in reality, it is the number one product that's out there right now.
So getting back to the question of I'm going, conference season's going to start wrapping up and start ramping up, soon, and we have release notes now, which have a huge amount for finance and operations. Are there things that you're going to be looking to hear from Microsoft with regard to where they're taking some of these capabilities, either in the product itself or in the deployment process, the implementation project, any of those areas that you hope to see next that will allow you to, when you talk to clients or prospects, say, these are some of the things that will make your hybrid requirements that much easier to realize?
Yeah, so I'm really following the activities around DevOps to understand better how the implementation tools are evolving. Along with that, the development platforms to understand, how I can package and deploy customizations in a risk-free way. That's really the key for me. It's always great to see the really awesome new features that come out, twice a year. And Microsoft is really setting a high bar for the competition with what they're doing. Some products like the HR talent piece, for example, are doing weekly releases of feature updates, which is incredible. So that's always fun. But for me, it's on the back end so that, for my focus on implementation and delivery, I want to see what Microsoft is developing and what's new to make my life easier and to make it easier to maintain a customer or do that upgrade, as you were talking before.
Peter, what about you?
Ken, you've been around long enough where we would install this kind of software off a floppy disk, right? And then when you're able to run it on a Novell network, right, you had this added complexity, right?
But I don't know what you're talking about.
I will send you a history book. But the thought for me always was that, in that day, the accounting software, which morphed into ERP, was 90% of what you were dealing with, and then there was this 10% piece that the computer or the network. And it seems to me that if you take a look now, that's completely shifted on its head, where 90% of what we're dealing with is this iceberg underneath the water of this incredible amount of technology, and what's sitting at the top, that peaking, out of the top 10% of that iceberg is the ERP application. It just seems like that thing is completely 100% shifted on its ear, and which Jason and I have talked to Jason about this on almost every one of these calls, is that one of the things that is so different in the time that I've been in this business is these projects, accounting software projects, ERP software projects, used to be run by the business, and the IT department supported the business, and now it's completely morphed on its head. Almost every one of these projects is an IT project, and the business folks are just hoping that it gets implemented correctly.
Wow, and that's one of the biggest things that makes my skin crawl, having been an IT director for so many years. And here operations people refer to an ERP implementation as an IT project. I mean, that is completely upside down and backwards, right? An ERP project is an operations project. There's no question about it. And quite frankly, if you do not have stakeholders, people who are invested daily in the proper care and feeding of an ERP project from the operations team, executive leadership, all the way down that same chain, get out, stop, pause until you do. You will not be successful, right?
Yeah, 100%. And think about all of the, companies and projects, the even ones that we've, dealt with together, where the business side is kind of an afterthought and they kind of get an update. You know what I mean? Instead of being the primary drivers. It's a real interesting, major change in the industry that, I've been around to see. So.
Well, and my favorite line is, this is an IT project because what do I know about installing software? Just like you pointed out with the old floppy disk. It's none of that, right? I mean, it's now companies are looking at products like D365 to bring more and more of their departments and their operating units onto the same platform. That's why you see this tremendous growth in products like HR and talent within the old AX product and now on D365. You're seeing them leverage the CRM side to integrate customer service and field service on the same platform. So as you start to put more and more and more of your business on that platform, if you don't have those key business stakeholders involved in that project, you will not be successful. You just can't do it.
Yeah. So I have one last question, Ken, because I appreciate all the time that you've spent taking aside. When I was doing a little bit of extra research on this, hybrid model, et cetera, deployment, I came across a new terminology that said it's edge deployments, right? And I was, oh my God, no. So what is that? So what is that they're throwing at us as a replacement for the hybrid model? It's an edge deployment. What are they talking about there?
Well, and see, that goes back to the concept of hybrid in general, where essentially you had your this was the model. It's not the model today, but it was where, you had on-premise systems that talk to, quote unquote, an edge device or server, which then talk to the SaaS environment. Right? So you had a replication model there between the edge server and the SaaS solution. And the concept was interesting. The drawings were fascinating. I mean, it basically gave you an on-premise, SQL Server instance that you could tap into. It really wasn't on-premise. It was in Azure. But anyway, that was kind of a cool concept, but it really didn't go anywhere. And just as Jason pointed out, I mean, I don't think we've heard anything of that since probably early 2017 or so. It's been a while. Microsoft released the on-premise version of D365, and I think a lot of that noise just went away. So now you have SaaS and on-premise, and everybody's happy. The market's looking really hard at SaaS, and quite frankly, Microsoft's leaving, a lot of interesting features out of the on-premise versions, maybe as a way to incentivize people to consider the SaaS model, right? I think the industry is moving towards SaaS. People are trusting it more because, we're all using it. I mean, how many devices and connections to online systems do you have on your cell phone today, right? There's no reason why you couldn't consider that for your ERP. And quite frankly, with the number of mobile users that need to have access to an ERP environment, it actually makes sense. So confidence is high, and that's where the product's going to. I think these concepts that we heard about in the early days of D365 from not only Dynamics, but also from other products are going to go away, and we're really going to get back to a SaaS model, and that's where it's going to go.
So Ken, however, is there a legitimate technology, business, security, whatever? Are there legitimate reasons why you would need an on-premise, would still need this product on-premise?
Yeah, there probably are. And a couple of the areas you can think of where, security is really an issue. Anything medical, right? Mm-hmm. Anything banking, anything that, where you have a secure lockdown of data, right? There's probably a need to have some sort of a very secure connection to the cloud. And that whole concept of an edge server, it may be considered more of an appliance to connect to the Microsoft cloud, right? As opposed to being a server and a SQL server. There are all sorts of security considerations and ways to access the cloud from a local network, right? And those should all be considered. So, I mean, that's more of an edge device now than any of the other concepts in the old hybrid world were.
I think one scenario that's already in sort of production to some extent is retail, where you can't afford to have a retail store stop selling at the counters if they lose, for whatever reason, they lose their internet connection. So I think there's that might be the one that Microsoft really supports right now.
Yep, the POS device in store. Exactly.
And then it can then sync back up. I think. I've never seen a demo of it or anything, but I think that's a supported scenario already.
I used it at a previous company. It's really cool. It allows you to do things like sidewalk sales without even having a network. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I always retail always seems to some sort of lead on those things with finance and operations. Those use cases are maybe some of the most clear or in the most high demand, I suppose.
And Jason, as I said on a previous podcast, stay away from, if you're in the consulting business, stay away from retail, because when you're out on the golf course or on your boat on the weekend, that's when they're doing a lot of stuff. And if something goes wrong, guess what happens to you around the golf or you're boating?
You're headed back to the dock.
Exactly right.
I'm just thinking back. I believe it was last year at a European conference where I saw two or three Microsoft officials stand up and sort of outline their plans for full hybrid. And I started off the conversation with this. I'll be back at a conference in March for a user group conference, and I will be watching carefully to see do those people or similar representatives sort of stand up and provide the progress that they were planning to make on these pretty complex scenarios that they outlined. That I assume, like Ken, you were suggesting, they probably came from some very loud, vociferous customers who said, "We can't live without this," and so they were going to give it a shot. Let's see if they don't come back this year with, here's the progress we've made in the last year, here's where it's going. I think you're right, Ken. To your point, they probably have just Microsoft has said it's not worth pursuing. It's not needed to pursue. Our clients have we've been able to change minds and attitudes, and we can move ahead without it. Or or if they come back with progress, then maybe it's still a line of effort that they're going to pursue. But I'm kind of willing to say after this spring's updates, yeah, if there's no real movement on it, I would agree with you. It's not any sort of additional hybrid architecture plans, maybe not going anywhere.
Well, I imagine that, trying to guess where Microsoft is going to go is probably not a winning strategy, but well, I've learned a whole bunch today from Ken, and I want to thank him for, bringing a whole bunch of great knowledge to the table here.
Always great to hear from you, Peter. Jason, it was great to meet you. Thanks for letting me spend some time with you today.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Ken Edwards and Peter Jekyll for joining me today. If you have any comments or thoughts on our AX2 Finance and Operations Upgrade series, please do be in touch. My email is jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.